All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to CovidChat, where we talk about the tangential and contiguous issues surrounding the SARS-CoV-2, otherwise known as the COVID-19 virus.
This is the only place where you can have an unfiltered and uncensored conversation about the impacts of the pandemic. I'm your host, Mario Christie.
And I'm your host, Lenore Terrelong.
We are now living in Corona time.
And the only way our nation can ensure survival is for us to
get the program. Always a fun point of the day. COVID-19 isn't going anywhere. It will be a defining factor in our lives and livelihoods for the foreseeable future. Though a critical public health concern, COVID-19 is not just a public health issue. It is a social, economic, and environmental issue. CovidChat is a program that will delve into all these issues and impacts caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as our national response. How will we address our national and global sustainability needs during this time?
This initiative is powered by the Jamaica Climate Change Youth Council, a youth affiliate of the Jamaica Climate Change Advisory Board, in partnership with Environmental Solutions Limited, the Caribbean's leading environmental consultancy firm. We want to welcome everyone to the discussion and thank you for joining. Please share with us on social media using the hashtags #CovidChat, #CoronaTime, and #TransformEducation. Don't forget to follow our Footprint JA on Twitter and Instagram, and ESL Caribbean on Twitter, and at Envirsol, that's ENVIRSOL, on Instagram.
This week, our focus will be on a critical foundation to development, education. We have heard the cries from students, teachers, and parents about this issue. What are our takeaways from that experience? And how can we move forward with creating a more inclusive experience in education? To help us get some answers, we have some very special guests with us this week. We have Lorenzo Smith, an educator, teacher of history and geography, who has an interest in curriculum instruction and teacher coaching. And we also have with us Michaela Gonzalez, owner and educator of Mathways Tutors. Thank you both for joining us today.
Yes, it's our pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
So at this point, I'm going to just open the floor and ask you both to just tell us a little bit about what you do in your different professions, and we'll start with Lorenzo.
Well, as you said, I'm a teacher. I teach history and geography. Apart from teaching, I lead workshops in curriculum instruction. So pretty much I help teachers to develop curriculum and also to carry out the curriculum, that's the instruction part. So, and also we look at what are some of the tools that we can use to pretty much be effective teachers of history and geography. So that's pretty much what I do. And on the side, I also do some college counseling, so help students to find what best college suits them and to look at scholarships and stuff like that. Yeah, pretty much.
Wow, very good. Hi, everyone. And I am Michaela Gonzalez, and I completed my master's last year. I did my master's in economics. And for a short while, I've been engaging in research. So I've done some research with Capri. I'm also doing work with EduFocal. However, starting the end of August, I'm actually pursuing, this career as a math teacher full time. So I've actually quit my job and I'm pursuing, going into math completely, just because I feel like now is the opportune time that I think I really need to give not just a piece of me to our education system, but, like full force and not just, as I said, just EduFocal, we're doing all of the subjects, but I kind of want to lend myself specifically to, enhancing math for the island itself. So, supporting not just EduFocal, but other companies as well, who are trying to, as you said, develop a national solution for Corona in this time. So what I do is I teach math. I do that privately. I also recently started a YouTube channel. Everybody's into YouTube these days. And the reason I even did the YouTube channel is because I know that in Corona, everybody can't afford extra classes or, to pay for private tutoring. So I said, what other way can I reach, every student in Jamaica? And, so that's the reason I've started the YouTube channel. So yeah, so I do a bit of project management. And of course, the main thing though is teaching math.
right, thank you both for that. You're both very inspiring, and I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation. Just a note to our audience, please remember this is an interactive conversation. So we encourage you to join in at any point you want to ask a question or have a comment. You can either type it directly into the chat box, or you can use the raised hand feature on Zoom so that you can pose your questions directly to one of our presenters. We're also taking questions for people that are watching on Facebook. You can just type your questions there. Remember, we're only here for an hour and a half, so please keep your questions and comments short and spicy, just so that we have the opportunity to hear from everyone.
All right, thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you, Michaela. Let's get right into it. Every child can learn. Every child must learn. That's the slogan of the Ministry of Education and Youth. However, since stay-at-home orders have been enforced, students have been asked to stay outside of the classroom, and we are now seeing the glaring inequities which exist in our education system. Notwithstanding these challenges, our 2030 vision documents the hope of our leaders for a brighter future for our youth. Goal 1 speaks to Jamaicans being empowered to achieve their fullest potential. Under this goal, one of the national outcomes is listed as, and I quote, world-class education and training, and that Vision 2030 Jamaica recognizes the need for every Jamaican child to have access to education to the level that enables him or her to access further education, training, and/or decent work. These can be logically assumed to fit in with the strategic objective number 2 of the current education framework, which says, secure teaching and learning opportunities that will optimize access, equity, and relevance throughout the education system. Even with knowledge and appreciation of what I just stated, hundreds of thousands of students were without proper access for a time to basic amenities that would have been necessary to ensure this equity even if COVID-19 did not happen. It's only now being brought to light because now students who never had internet access or the tools to access content online were unable to utilize public and school libraries, internet cafes, and in some cases even their neighbors' computers. The ICT infrastructure in rural Jamaica was also brought to light and further underscores the inequity in our approach to development. So I want to start out by asking, and Lorenzo, you lost the toss, so you have to go first. How do we feel about these Vision 2030 and strategic initiative claims that have been made to ensure equity among our school goals?
All right. So I'm going to go to my document. Are you guys seeing my document here?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right, great. So I'll just answer by going through this document here. So it's rather interesting that we're doing this now, seeing that just, I think, the 23rd of July, as I have there, 2020, we launched Education Transformation Commission, which is pretty much tasked to review the education system altogether from early childhood right up to tertiary, make recommendations, and to look at it with a critical eye. So that was there, and then out of that, the launch, we have I picked up 3 key points. The first point was made from Minister Samuda, which mentioned the whole point of equity, and then we have the other point from opposition leader, spokesperson on education, Mr. Bunting, who's mentioned the fact that our education system, or education rather, our classrooms are under-resourced and lack technology. We're not seeing greater use of technology in the classroom. And also he made mention of the point of the inequity that exists in the education system. And then the final point that stood up for me was the point made mention by the Prime Minister, where he was saying that it's not a matter of spending, it's a matter of returns on the investment. So in essence, that we're spending a lot of money, but we're not getting the returns on the investment. So that is part of the problem that's, I think, where we need to focus on. How can we get return on our investment? And that goes into the whole issue now of equity in the whole system. Mario mentioned earlier that, there's a divide, or there's a gap between urban and rural Jamaica.
Oh my God.
But if we look at it, there is also a gap within urban Jamaica, that is
Jamaica.
within Kingston itself. Because just take a look, if we look at Ardennes versus a Haile Selassie, and if we look at the fact that the first point here where it says that equity in education requires putting systems in place to ensure that every child has equal chance of success. If we look at this statement, and if we compare Haile Selassie to Ardennes, can we say then that every child every child has an equal chance of success? Can we truly say that? So there's a divide, there's a gap within the urban area, and there's a wider gap within urban and rural Jamaica. So that is, we need to then bridge those gaps. And the question is, how can we bridge those gaps? And for me, one would have to go back to the very beginning. How is it that how our schools were, constructed or designed? We have to look at it that we had schools that were designed to bring up a middle class. Those are the grammar schools or the traditional schools. Those are the schools with the Latin motto that we love so dearly. And then we chastise the other schools without the Latin mottos. And those other schools are those schools with the technical skills. So we have the grammar schools or the traditional schools versus the technical schools or the upcoming, the upgraded secondary schools. And so we have that sort of divide in our education system, and we treat them in such ways, in terms of resources. We treat them in that way. We give a lot of resources to the traditional, and sometimes, not all the cases, but sometimes we really, don't focus much on the upgraded high schools. And so what we're seeing then is that if we look at the profile of the educated Jamaican, this is an extract from the Vision 2030. If we look at the profile of the educated Jamaican, profile 1 says that love to learn and will therefore be a lifelong learner, continuously developing wisdom and knowledge. Is this being promoted in our education system? Let's look at profile 2. Be well-rounded, agile of mind, be able to adjust to different situations. Again, are we seeing this, seeing this being fostered in our education system? There's a question mark there. Speak an additional language and have at least minimum requirement for tertiary education. Again, there's a big question mark there. So the point is that, are we fulfilling the mandate of Vision 2030? And my short answer is no. And what was interesting is that at the launch again of the Education Transformation Commission, the chairman, Professor Orlando Patterson, said that we are not ready to meet the 4th industrial revolution. We're not ready. And why he said that we're not ready, he pointed to some data, and the data were quite startling, that we have underperformance in our boys. We have underperformance in math. We have underperformance in science. We have underperformance in English. And if we have underperformance in those basic subjects, which are fundamental for this 4th industrial revolution, then we're really not ready for this, for this transformation or this 4th industrial revolution. We're really not ready for it, which is what he said. And I tend to believe, to agree with him, because we are seeing where we have these high failure rates in our math and science. And if we have high failure rates in math and science, then what is the success rate for STEM if we're going to talk about STEM education? So my focus where I want to go is to look at transforming how we teach, transforming how teachers, approach teaching, all of those things. We have to look at that, transforming how we prepare teachers for this, for the classroom, and also look at our social landscape. Look at the social landscape. Examine if it is, reaching everyone. Examine if, and obviously we know it's not reaching everyone. So what can we do to bridge that gap? The first thing we have to look at is the access to internet. Access to internet. It's very, very important that we still have hearts in this very island, within urban areas and outside of the urban area, that still have poor connectivity or poor access to internet. And even places that have access to internet, it's not reliable. So if we're going to talk about transforming the education space, if we're going to talk about technologizing the education or the classroom, we have to look at that very important thing, which is access to internet. Very, very important. And these are some of the things that the COVID-19 highlighted for us. These are some of the gaps that it highlighted, that we have unreliable internet service. We have expensive data. For those parents who had to buy credit and those things, for, to put on their children's phone, to access work, data is expensive. We have that. And then the other thing that we have is a lack of equipment. There are students there without proper equipment or proper technological equipment to assist or to facilitate online learning. So we have to address that. And I think the government is just coming on stream to addressing that with the tablets in school. And my thing is, tablet in school is good, but it must be paired with the access to internet, because if you don't have the internet, the tablet is useless.
All right. So I'm gonna stop it on that point.
Sure.
Lorenzo, because you're pretty much answering all my questions, and I want to give Michaela a chance.
Sure.
So I'm gonna segue from your. Could you just bring back your presentation to that first slide?
Sure.
Yes. That first point, we have to take great care to ensure equity, equal opportunity for all. And it boggles my mind that Minister Samuda was the one to have said that. So I'm gonna throw this out to you, Michaela, on this point, and considering his previous blunder in the media with our secondary school students, where he said regarding the date of the change of date for the CXC exams, we are driven by a principle that one placed in a position to lead. You must lead from the top. You must lead from the participation of those who are particularly involved in setting policy and discharging policy set down by the government of Jamaica. Then he continued to say, you could never imagine us arriving at a conclusion as to when to engage students in an examination by being guided by hundreds or over 100,000 students. I am not sure to this day that we have fully addressed the impact of such a statement, and even with the Education Transformation Commission, there is no representation from the student population. So I want to know, in your perspective, Michaela, from your perspective, what kind of message does this send for the future of education in Jamaica?
Right, and I'm happy at the beginning of the session you said that this is supposed to be a open and frank discussion, because we're not going to get anywhere if we don't actually cite things for what they are. And I can say, especially being a previous student leader, if I was guild president at that time, for example, and I heard something like that, I know my students would be telling me it's time to riot, and that's reasonable. And I mean, when you're in a leadership position, I think the responsibility is on you as a leader to choose your words. So even though, yes, he might be able to say, yes, that's not exactly, what he meant, the point is psychology. We understand what message is going to be sent. And you cannot take back, how it made people feel. And even reading it, again, I'm putting myself in the place of a student, and it would have made me feel like, okay, the Ministry of Education is supposed to be there to support me, to be my voice, actually. But how can you be my voice if you're not listening to, what I have to say? Then it means that you're not effectively representing whatever it is I stand for or I believe in. As I said, I'm a teacher. So I remember when the COVID-19 just started, some of my students, the anxiety was high. They just weren't sure what was happening, because remember, for a very long time there was no definitive decision on what was going to happen. And they were starting to lose momentum. I mean, for some students, yes, they're going to be happy that, okay, yeah, man, I get more time. But for the others, I mean, you're going to grow anxious. And then that is, I mean, I feel like we haven't even touched on the mental health issues that are coming out of COVID-19 and how it has affected our students. And for me, I feel like, how can you not? In fact, it should have been the majority of students, or you have different task force where you have different student bodies. I mean, you have the National Student Council, you have these various student bodies. Like, I think what it is that the government tends to say that, we're listening to the voice of the young people, and, we have these boards. So, for example, persons who like to make it seem like, the Guild of Students or the National Student Council, that they really don't serve a purpose in terms of advocating for change. But then it says, okay, what happens when it comes to the real issues now, which is something like this? This is the time you engage your young people. This is the time you put us to the forefront and say, what are your suggestions? What are your solutions? You know, and I think I would have appreciated more if the majority of the decision was based on, you know, like consecutive consultation, consistent consultation, getting the voice, if it's even a consultation with you know, a group of students from each parish, so that at the end of the day you can say this decision which is being made was being made after consulting with, you know, the students who are ultimately the ones being affected. So for me, I don't necessarily think I would say it says what it is or isn't going to happen for Jamaica's education system, but I do believe it may have caused some doubt in the minds of the young people. And I think we have to understand that even when young people, for example, you know, you said there is voter apathy and stuff like that, it's because of reasons like this. Because then when it's time for us to have a voice, it's as if we don't, you know? So, I mean, as I said, I don't think it's gonna say exactly where the future for Jamaica's educational system is going to go, but I do think it has left a bad taste in the mouths of many Jamaicans, even as parents. And so, yeah, and I mean, I know you're asking me this question, but there are a few points because I know Lorenzo has his presentation and I don't want him to go too far without me making some comments.
Go ahead.
So, you know, right. So he was speaking about, you know, just the idea of equity. And he started speaking about the fact that you were mentioning, you know, there's a divide between, you know, what a student in rural Jamaica experiences versus urban.
Michaela,
but then, yes?
let me ask you to hold that because I actually do.
Okay.
I'm gonna get into that some more. But
Okay, no problem.
I don't want this
It's
train
because
that
we're
we're
so
on to leave
excited, you know,
us.
so we're just trying to
I
give you all the
understand.
information.
I get it, and I feel in the energy over here. But based on what you just said, though, in my mind, what it feels like, as an educator myself, because I used to teach in the government system, and I also do run a private practice myself. It feels to me like a grand token.
Yes.
For the most part, because as you said, they say they're listening, but at the same time, when it matters, they don't engage young people, because any sort of transformation that is supposed to happen now with the education system has to involve the needs of the students. It cannot be a top-down. If it's a top-down approach, I think we're just going to be back where we are now in very short order. So I want to ask one final question on this to both of you in as 2 sentences. Do you think that based on what we know the reality to be in Jamaica, culturally, physically, economically, do you think that this commission will be able to move Jamaica's education system to a place to be ready, or even if we miss the start of the fourth industrial revolution, to catch up, given all the impacts to accessing education as well as learning? Michaela.
Well, I will start. Well, I mean, I don't know every single person on the commission in terms of personally, but I can say Gordon Swaby, he's a part of the commission and I work with him every day. I can say that if it is that everybody's going to have the passion and the vision that Gordon has, then I'm definitely confident that, you know, it's not going to be just talk, it's going to be action as well. But what I will say is, I think it's going to take more, as you said, it can't be a top-down approach. So, I mean, yes, it's nice that we have the commission to guide and to give vision and to, you know, to ensure that the people have like a trustworthy. So, because these are all people who have been in the education system for, you know, years. So, yes, there's the credibility and there's the experience that we need. But then, as you said, I think what's really going to put it over the top now is ensuring that we ensure the students, the teachers, and the parents. Those 3 elements have to be like at the forefront of this discussion, of the consultation. Is just that the commission will lend to put all of those ideas together because, you know, going back to the statement that was made, I think the idea that was, you know, trying to be portrayed was that, you know, if you have too many people in the kitchen, of course, you're going to spoil the pot, right? So it's not to say that, yes, you're going to be able to take in all the opinions and considerations. So that is why you have the high level or the commission now who will be able to put those ideas together, but it can't be that you don't get the ideas. Yeah, so you cannot assume what is happening with students. You have to ask students what is happening. You cannot assume what the teachers are going through. You have to ask the teachers. Same thing. I think a big element of this discussion that has been left out are the parents. You're talking about parents who have to go to work, who now have to think about students who have been home, which they did not plan for. You're talking about sometimes the children might end up being at home alone. You end up talking about them not being able to provide the support because some of them themselves don't know how to use the technology. And I remember, there was something that came out, voice note of parents kind of just expressing her, her anger, whatever it was in terms of how she felt about not being in her frustration, not being able to help her child. And, even though it was ridiculed and stuff like that, for me, I am coming from an inner city community. I know my mommy does not know how to use technology. Majority of the time when I had homework and stuff like that, my mommy would have to call her friends who, would have had certain educational experiences. So I'm just thinking that the parents, because the thing is, the commission is not going to be in the households. The commission is not going to be there with every single parent. Who's going to be with those students every single day or most of the time? It's between the teachers and their parents. So you have to ensure that those two elements or those two, bodies of people, they're on the same page. They understand the vision. They understand what part they play. And then you not only tell them, but you support them. So whatever they need to get ready to help these students, then we do that.
Thanks for that, Michaela. Lorenzo?
All right. So as Michaela said, yes, it will not solve everything. I think, well, one, we don't know the terms of reference for the commission. So I guess when we see the terms of reference, we can, have a greater conversation around that. But I definitely do have faith in the commission. Yes, I do have hope in Gordon Swaby. We know his work, doing very good work with Edufocal. Also, there's Esther Tyson. When you talk about transformational leader, you talk about Esther Tyson, who has pretty much moved Arden, into pretty much a world-class institution, went to Tarrant High and transformed Tarrant High altogether. And then we have another principal there to, I think, Florida Plummer from Nagazet Primary School, another transformational school where most of the students from Nagazet going to Campion and these, again, cherished schools that we so love. And then there is a principal of Church Teachers College, which is the teacher training institution. So he would, bring that sort of know-how there on the commission. So it's a good blend, I find. Yes, there is no student voice. I would love to see a student voice there, maybe a youth voice as well.
Definitely.
But there's room for it. There's room for it, I think, because these commissions normally have subcommittees. Where they invite other persons to sit in these subcommittees where they can get more intimate detail, critical detail information rather to put in this wider commission. So I have faith in it. It's good. My only caution is that we don't just do the commission, have the report, have the recommendations, and we sit on it, and then another 4 or 5 years we're doing another commission, because there was a commission previous to this one in 2004. Where's the recommendation? What are we done with the recommendation? We have doing studies. We have studies on top of studies and commissions on top of commissions, reports on top of reports. But what have we done with these reports and commissions and studies? This is where we are.
In our first session, one of our speakers actually pointed out that Jamaica is a country of studies. Like, we love studies. Yes, so we do a whole heap of them and just shelf them just to say we have done them. So I'm glad you pointed that out, Lorenzo, because that really will make a difference in how we are able to move forward if we actually action these recommendations that we would get from all of this research. So, sorry.
I just wanted to point out, because I'm seeing the comments that are coming in, and I realized that somebody said, that the previous commission would have actually done a lot. And here's the thing, again, just speaking from my experience, being a student leader before, and I remember there would be times, and I've served with Eleanor before, you're doing so much work, and then, your student body or, the people you're serving, they say, hey, but I never feel like you did enough, or I'm just not seeing the impact of it. And I think something that's very big that we miss just overall with our Jamaican government is communication. Yes, I believe this particular serving government is doing better at communication. However, it's a thing. If you don't tell the people what you're doing, they cannot know. Because at the end of the day, you cannot reach everybody. So, right. I don't think it was that learners was, discrediting that there was a lot of work done, but it's a case where if I am not seeing the immediate impacts, you have to tell me. You have to tell me. And of course, as my leader, I will trust that you won't be dishonest. So if you tell me that we have moved from point A to point B, then I will believe you. But you have to say something to me. you have to say something to the people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to make mention. Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's jump back to the previous conversation now. Lorenza had segued into identifying a number of the challenges. So we want to pick up back on that. So we know what the digital divide is, and for those who are listening who don't know, it's any uneven distribution in the access to, use of, or impact of information and communication technologies between any number of distinct groups, which can be defined based on a social, geographical, or geopolitical criteria or otherwise. So we know that this is very real in Jamaica. We spoke about urban versus rural, and we spoke about urban, within the urban situation, you know, the uptown versus the downtown. There is clearly an element of inequality. Some will say it's fueled by discrimination, whether it's intentional or not, but that's not why we are here today. But what I want us to get to from our conversation is how we can close this divide if we don't address these inequalities. And I suspect that for some persons, that's going to be somewhat of an uncomfortable conversation, because first, you'll now have to admit that, listen, there is some element of discrimination in how we approach resourcing or outfitting our schools with what they need. And people don't want to have that kind of conversation. So how can we make people comfortable to talk about this issue so we can close the gaps and by addressing the inequalities that exist?
Well, the fact of the matter is that it's an uncomfortable discussion that we must have. So I wouldn't say, well, let's make people comfortable. Let's make them uncomfortable, because we need to have the discussion. We need to have the discussion. Again, I go back. The fact of the matter is, when you look at a school, I went to Glenmere. When you look at a school, say like Glenmere, there is a healthy group of past students who are continuously contributing to the school, to assist in the school. And for most traditional schools, there's that healthy group of past students, old boys and old girls and all these past students who are well established in their professions, who can assist and offset government subvention. Is there such a case in these secondary schools or upgraded secondary schools? Not necessarily. And so you see the divide, you see that discrimination, you see that gap, you see the inequality, just by how the schools are constructed, just in how the schools are resorts. You see that when you look at a school, for example, again, I go back to the Haile Selassie versus the Ardennes. When you look at those two schools, and when you look at what Ardennes has, and you look at what Haile Selassie has, you wonder why. Why is it? Why can't we all have pretty much the same thing? Why can't we all have equal resources or equal access? And the government will argue that there is an equal resources right across the board. But the great, again, when you look at the quality of teachers, a teacher is not necessarily going to go into maybe a Haile Selassie. Why? Because of the environment. So we have to, it's a whole, I think, socioeconomic shift that will, well, not necessarily shift, but overall that we'll have to do to get rid of this divide or gap that we have in our education system. And it is real. It is very real. And because we have this gap, the leader of opposition talk about an education apartheid, and it is very much there. We have that distinct divide. And again, I go back to just looking at how we look at our schools. Those schools with the Latin motto, we cherish them, we wear them on badge of honor, and those schools without, we laugh at them, we ridicule them because they're not as good as us. And so one uncomfortable truth that we must face is that for many of us, we don't want to bridge the divide, because bridging the divide means that people are not going to be equal. And we don't like that. So we love that our society is built on an us and them sort of situation or syndrome. It's the us and them.
Somebody was mentioned.
I said forms.
Somebody was mentioning this whole idea of schoolism.
Yes.
The other day on Twitter, and I found it so interesting.
It is very real. It is very real.
Most definitely.
What about
How
you,
dare
Michaela?
you? How dare you go to Vauxhall want to be like us are the campaigner? How dare you? That sort of a thing. So it is.
Oh,
We have to break that. We have
that's
to tear those down, and that will have to come from as I said, just a wide scale socioeconomic tearing down. As they're going on and pulling down the zinc fences in these inner city communities, we need to tear
Yeah,
down the fences in the
on the
education
schools.
system because they're just there to serve a particular group in our society, and that particular group in our society enjoys it, and that's why it's still there because people are enjoying the benefits of being the us and the them.
all right. Thanks, Lorenzo. What about you, Michaela? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, I'm trying to incorporate, people's feedback into, just to keep the discussion going. But for me, no, I definitely agree with Lorenzo. Definitely, I saw somebody say truth bombs and all truth. Something I wanted to bring up in terms of, bridging the gap. I know we're speaking about, okay, we said, yes, there's rural versus the urban. Then you're saying, okay, there's even further divide in terms of urban, even within the urban, which is why you mentioned, your Arden and your Hill Selassie. I want to say there's a divide even within the very classroom. So even at and I mean, Lawrence, I mean, I'm just supporting you by just saying that that's how micro we have to go into this issue, because and it's the same thing. Like you start from, you keep on, just keep peeling off the layers, and you say, okay, where does the problem really begin? Because I mean, even so again with the research, there was some time back for my master's, I was doing a research, and that was actually what I was looking at. Like, why does a student at, for example, a Campion, why do they perform better than a student at somewhere else? And some of the things that were coming out, of course, is the fact that, okay, some children have to travel further than some to go to school. So, for example, even the travel time, if somebody is going, and I mean, we're talking about being real and having the uncomfortable conversations. You driving home in a nice car to go home versus you having to take 5 buses, and everything. By the time you get home, you're tired. Like, it's just not the same reality as somebody who probably lives close by, is driven to school, probably has enough, their parents are in a position to maybe give them breakfast in the morning. Many students go to school without breakfast in the morning. You're talking about when they go home, you're talking about the education level of other persons in the household with them. Okay, they come home and they have homework. Do they have that kind of support? You know what I mean? In terms of, you're talking about the internet access, you're talking about the technology. So even though, yes, because I can speak from experience, I have students that they have to be borrowing their parents' phone to have the classes with me. So they don't even have their own things. And then, of course, it's not every household a parent is going to just be, I mean, yes, you'd want everybody to be okay with saying, it's for educational purposes, so you can use the phone. I mean, it's still, there's still going to be that divide. So I'm just saying the reality is not the same for everybody. And I just kind of want to even say it's not just about the schools, it's even within the schools.
Within the schools,
yeah, even within the schools.
Yeah.
But to bridge the gap, I think we can't just throw money at the problem. I think in Jamaica, that's something we do a lot. We think, okay, education needs to be fixed. All right, we've given it a bigger budget. It's clear that a bigger budget is not the only solution. It has to be a very personal approach. It has to be about vision. I think the easiest way to start, like actually seeing change in just anything, is you have to get people to buy into a vision. I said, yes, I know we have this vision 2030, but I'm pretty sure if we can take maybe 10 random Jamaicans, going halfway through and ask them, what is Vision 2030? Just tell me one of the goals of Vision 2030. What does Vision 2030 mean to you? How do you think you're going to benefit from Vision 2030? I'm pretty sure you will not get the responses you expect to get, meaning they probably don't know. They've never seen the document. Nobody has ever broken it down to them. And that's the thing. People will not talk about this in economics. People are selfish, right? It's just the reality of it. So every human being is acting in their own self-interest. So you know what you need to do in everything you're going to do? You have to show them how it responds or how it relates to the self, to them. Yes. And by them realizing the value it has to them, they say, okay, so yes, you're telling me my child can go to university. First of all, I don't even think telling a child that they go to university is a great selling point anymore, because so many of my friends, we go to university. Check this out. I have degree in actuarial science. I have master's in economics. Yet I still have to be thinking, okay, how can I get a job that pays me well enough to? Because I'm supposed to be the breadwinner of the family. No, because what? Everybody poured into me because they were told that, all right, if I send my child to university, they're going to be able to come out of the struggle And you know, but then what happened? You can't, some of us can't get jobs. Then when you get jobs, you know you're being underpaid. But what are you going to do? It's an employer's world. You know what I mean? So unfortunately, you take the salaries. When you hear some persons, what they get for salaries, by the time they take the taxi or the bus to go and come back and get food, the salary is done. Like, how will you build from that? And so for me, I think the biggest thing that this commission and just overall we're going to have to do is get people to buy into a vision. Whatever the vision is for Jamaica's education system and just overall, we have to communicate that. So I'm talking on the TV, on the radio. Everybody is supposed to know what is the vision we're going towards. And it sounds nice to have this document, but really and truly, if we had to put the vision in one sentence, everybody should be saying that same thing. Because I'm pretty sure if I ask Eleanor now what is her thing, yeah, she has something, but she's going to say one thing. Lorenzo is going to say one thing. I'm going to say one thing. So at the end of the day, we need a common vision that everybody knows, even though, yes, there's the environmental part, there's the education part. If everybody was supposed to be asked, what's Jamaica's vision? We all have an idea. We're going to use the same words. So I think that's like one of the major things, which doesn't take any money. All it takes is sincere conversations, going into the communities, meeting the people, and starting to talk to them.
Right, and I think that's what we lack at all levels, from the government coming all the way down to the household. Having sincere conversations about issues. I think that's something that is culturally ingrained in us. That's going to take some work. I have two questions following up on the conversation we just had. The first one, Lorenzo, you started to talk about past students and how they can benefit the schools. But what I want to ask, I think there's an over-reliance on past students association in Jamaica. For some reason, based on the conversations that I'm hearing, it's almost as if the past students associations are the ones that are supposed to be handling the resource needs of schools. But at the same time, for some schools, the past students associations really don't have any say in terms of what kind of policies or procedures the school can implement. So you kind of wonder what's the trade-off to having that sort of role. But the main issue I'm having is, why is there such a heavy reliance on past students association? What is the government not doing, or is it a true, sincere incapability of the government to handle this task as it relates to all the schools?
Well, the government, since obviously can't, do everything. Well, they should, but they don't have enough resources to distribute. But I don't necessarily think that there's an over-reliance. What I would say is that I would look at it as an endowment endowment fund sort of situation. If we compare, say, high schools here to to colleges or universities in the US, we would see where these students who have gone to, say, Harvard, Princeton, wherever, and have done well, create like a scholarship fund or bursary for their school. I look at it as that's similar to what we do with our high schools, because we're very attached to our high schools than we're attached to our university for reasons we won't get into. And so because of that attachment to our high schools, we want the best for our high schools, and so we'll donate to our high schools. We will help out with in a lab or student, needy student or whatever. So that's sort of an endowment fund situation. That's how I would look at it. Not necessarily that an over reliance on past student association. And then there's the other side of it, where we're all into image. We love image, we love prestige, and we love the fact, love the fact that, hey, when I went to Glenmuir was at this prestige, so it must maintain that sort of image. It cannot go down. And so because I wanted to maintain that sort of image, I'm going to continue to contribute to Glenmuir so that it maintains that image. So there's that also, that sense of pride that we have, an attachment that we have to our schools, and so that leads us now to contribute. But then when you look at it, the students who attend these prestigious high schools tend to go off into professional careers where they can give back to their schools. The students from non-traditional high schools are not necessarily so well off. So you find that there's a gap now in some schools, and in some schools there's a gap. So for example, one school can have virtual labs, while the other schools, they're fighting over one, burner or whatever
Right.
it is in their school, because they don't have that sort of a past student association or endowment to assist them in building up there. So there's that sort of a situation. And as I said, this past student, this endowment thing goes back to the whole issue of the divide, of the discrimination, of the inequity that is in our education system. And it ought not to be, because the government should be stepping in and filling that gap. The government should be doing that, but based on how the education system was created, based on that system there, where we have schools that were created literally to build a middle class. That was how most schools were created, to build a middle class. And then we have schools that were created for skills purposes.
Right.
So
So,
when
but
we
then,
look at that,
if we follow that line of reasoning, Don Lorenzo, I think therefore the government is sort of missing the importance of the feedback loop, because if you invest in schools at a similar level, well, not necessarily to give them equal resources, but to address the issue of equity, because some schools really don't need as much as others. If you invest in the schools in that way and create that sort of culture where the students would feel like, it is because of attending this school where I'm able to achieve how I have achieved or I'm achieving, then they would then now go back and reinvest in the upcoming students from the
yeah,
schools. So,
I agree.
but I don't think it's fair for us to call on past students when really and truly we have to fight tooth and nail going through high school to get a little piece of paper after the 5 years. I just don't think that is fair.
No, it's definitely not fair. And as I said before, it's the government's job to, resource these schools. Yes, that's definitely so. Past students should contribute at their will. We shouldn't be a reliance on them. It's definitely not fair for the government, for past students to take up the slack for governments, sure. But let's move it outside of the government. You talk about allowing students to feel a part of. Sometimes we have to look at our teachers and look at how teachers react to these students in these schools. Teachers' reaction to students is important. Our teacher-student relationship is important, very, very important. If you want a student to trust you, you have to treat that student as that student is a human being. There are human beings in front of you, and you must treat students accordingly. And sadly, I have visited some schools that are non-traditional schools, and I have listened to how some teachers interact with these students, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't nice. So there is that sense of, oh, I am less than. And when you go to schools in the traditional area, you look at how teachers react with those students. It's completely different. Completely different. So we have to look at how we interact with students. They're human beings and need to be treated as such. Love, respect, those are words that we need to have in the classroom. Too often teachers use fear as respect, and fear is not respect. It's not.
That sounds like one of those post-colonial relics coming from the time of
And at this point, Mario and Lawrence, I actually want to come into the rescue of the teachers and kind of say that I also think just as how, and this is why it's a ripple effect. So just as how we want the teachers to treat the students with respect and ensure that you're meeting their needs, I think there needs to be a total change in Jamaica about how we treat teachers and how we view teachers. I think a lot of this projection of, the anger and the kind of aggressiveness that they have towards students is because they also don't feel respected. And they also don't feel as if they are valued within. So I'm not saying that for all Lorenzo, I'm just kind of adding, all the pieces, which is why, again, we're saying we have to just, it's education, or it's such an interesting thing to me. There's just so much moving parts. And so it's moving parts that you literally cannot leave out one part. It's kind of like if you have a car, and you have everything nice, but you forget the wheels, like you're not going anywhere, you know? And so, I mean, for me, I think it's just including everybody. So with the teachers now, because I have a particular student, and you know, he was talking to me one day after class, and he was like, he really enjoys coming to my classes. And I said, you know, just out of curiosity, I asked him what was different between, you know, me teaching him and his teacher at school. And he was saying that to me. He said, the fact that his teacher is so aggressive towards them, it really makes it hard for him to learn. And I didn't even think that a student would, I mean, I know we probably talk about it, you know, but hearing it from a student, I'm like, oh, so this really is an issue. You know what I mean? And I thought, how many other students out there, you know, aren't grasping a certain subject simply because of the attitude of the teacher? And I would love to have, you know, conversations with teachers to say, like, what are the challenges? What challenges are you facing? You know, is it that, I mean, of course, we know the pay is definitely a part of it. You know, is it that, okay, if we can't give them, you know, more pay, is it that we can give them other benefits? Is it that we can give them more health benefits? Is it that we can reduce the cost of other things for them so that, again, as I said, throwing literal money at the problem sometimes doesn't solve it. But even us having that conversation with teachers to say, like, what are you feeling? And even though, yes, this may be happening, again, it's not being communicated to the average Jamaican, you know, and so we don't know what is happening. So even though I may say, yes, that happens for some teachers, I know it doesn't happen for all. So I mean, I definitely...
I can totally relate to both the points that both of you have expressed. Because when I taught back a few years ago, I found it surprising that as a new teacher coming into the school, like my office was almost like their recess room, and students began telling me about issues they were having at home, and I'm like, we have 2 guidance counselors. Why aren't you talking to the guidance counselors about these things? And their response shook me, because I'm like, what's the real purpose of guidance counselors if students can't talk to them? So I do understand what you're saying, Michaela, how the teachers feel working in the space will impact how they treat the students, and then that goes back to Lorenzo's point that interaction is what's gonna really make or break students. But I want
and sorry, Maria, I just want to add one last point to that. And it's just as how students will feel like, you know, at the beginning you were saying, sometimes a student may say like, how dare, you know, a student who is going to a non-traditional school, you know, want to dream big and those kind of things. It's the same thing for teachers, you know, because there's that same discrimination where if it is that I was supposed to say I'm a teacher at, you know, for example, a Vauxhall or some other, you know, school versus a Campion, let's be honest, which one do you think would sound better in a room if I'm trying to tell, you know, my parents, my friends' parents? Of course, they would be more impressed by me saying I teach at Campion. But again, that is simply from perception. A teacher, the same teacher from Campion could be put at Vauxhall and maybe even cause more transformation, but it's just that perception that we have. And I was saying it on Twitter the other day, and I said to them, I've known that teaching is my passion for as long as I can remember. But you know what? I've just been dabbling in so many other careers, because at the end of the day, what sounds more impressive? What sounds more impressive is that, and especially as I said, I'm coming from an inner city community. So naturally, you hear like, okay, yeah, man, you know, you must be a lawyer, doctor. First of all, when I told my community I wanted to be an actuary, everybody didn't know what that was, but it's own fancy. And when I tell them how much money I can make, that was even better. Yeah. That is wow, okay, prized possession. But then at the end of the day, I've done the degree, I've done the master's, and I realized, you know what, at the end of the day, where my passion still lies, there's nothing that gives me greater satisfaction than when I'm teaching. So then I tweeted and I said, you know, I used to be somewhat ashamed to say I want to be a teacher, but now I wear it proud, and I feel like the transformation that I can make is just endless. And you know, a few persons were like, why would you be ashamed? And I'm like, that's exactly it. Like, the fact that you cannot openly say that you know exactly why I would be ashamed is why we won't get anywhere. Because then you won't allow for the other teachers who need to feel uplifted to say, yes, this is the career choice. First of all, I think that we need to be, as a solution even for the government, so many times we're telling persons to go to university, and I saw someone in the feedback, she was saying, you know, in terms of matching the labor market, what the labor market actually needs and what we send people to university for. I think right now it's just a free-for-all, you know. If you want to be a doctor, you say, okay, yes, let's be a doctor, let's be a lawyer. But then it's like, okay, but what does Jamaica actually need? At this point in time, what career, what professions do we actually need? And how about we push students into that? So we know that right now, especially given this whole corona thing, we're gonna need all hands on deck as it relates to teachers. So that the teachers who are doing online classes can focus on online, and maybe those who are doing in person can focus on complementing that. But then again, are we going to go to somebody who maybe they like teaching, but nobody ever said to them, you know, that this is a good career, you know, the government is pumping money into that. You won't have to pay to maybe, or maybe you'll get a subsidy for your degree if you decide to go into teaching. Maybe we're going to give a raise for the salaries. Maybe you'll get these benefits. Again, where's the value? Like, what are we saying to teachers for them to actually, or people who could be teachers, for them to want to go now and be a part of the solution, you know? So, I mean, I really just wanted to add that, because I think it's really important that we just that whole perception of teachers. Like, right now, I feel like Jamaica's biggest, like, you know, the chairs for the, as I said, what it is, the wheels for the car, that really thing that's going to push us is that we're going to have the teachers on deck. We're going to have them buy into a vision, and not just the existing ones. Like, we're going to need new teachers as well. So I just feel like we need to get people into the habit of saying, yes, like, being a teacher is an awesome profession. Like, I'm going to get to change lives, and this is going to change my life as well. So just wanted to put that out there.
I'm actually glad you went there, because I had a question for you specifically about, based on what you would have said, in talking about the digital divide. You know, going to university with, you know, energized because you have these high hopes of you know, getting the career that you wanted. But then when you come out of university, you realize it's not available for you in your home country, and migration is not as easy as 1, 2, 3 as people make it look online. So I just wanted to get a sort of feel, and I know this is kind of just looking into the future with the Education Transformation Commission, because I'm actually scared that we're going to be looking at education in a silo. You know, it's about what are we teaching the students in this instance, but is it matching up, relating to Daniel's comment, which you pointed out, is it matching up with the global, not even local alone, the global job market? When these students leave school, high school, university, are they now equipped with the soft skills that employers are looking for? Because entrepreneurship is not like something you just get up and start and succeed at the same time, right? Will they have the soft skills that they need? Will they have the hard skills that they need? What are your thoughts on the approach that the commission should take?
For me, I think the commission is going to have to, as I said, as you rightfully said, it's not just looking at education by itself, it's how is education going to assist with all the other goals that need to be achieved, you know? So again, you said that we do a lot of papers, we do a lot of research, all of that, but then it's kind of pulling on, okay, maybe we don't have to start all over. Maybe we need to pull on all the research that has been done already. Maybe we need to look at what exactly it is, as I said, that Jamaica needs right now. I can remember when I was in high school, nobody ever came to me. I mean, I just came up with wanting to be an actuary off the top of my head because of how much I heard I could earn. I didn't actually have anywhere to go to see, okay, is there a shortage for actuaries in Jamaica? You know what I mean? Like, what would I even need to do to become an actuary? Even that type of information is not available. I know right now we're thinking about Corona, you're going to think about, okay, what about food security? We're going to need to be thinking about, as you said, we need ICT, we need more persons in technology, we need more persons who are in, you know, the creative industry. Because let me tell you, it's not just about teaching online, it's about doing that creatively so that the students feel as engaged as when you are in person. I actually think teaching online is maybe 2 times, maybe not 5 times harder than in person, because you have to put in that extra effort to ensure that your students are being engaged. And to be honest, that's not only on the part of just the teacher. I'm going to need to engage maybe some graphic designers, maybe even, you know, get some more, you know, like training for myself, maybe do a digital course so that I know how to create better PowerPoints. I see Lorenzo here, clearly he has a PowerPoint thing down. You see, he came prepared. But even something like that, I feel like rather than us just talking, look at that, him putting up the PowerPoint, adding an extra flair to the discussion. It's adding an extra, okay, well, now I'm hearing it, but I'm also seeing it. You know what I mean? And then it's like, okay, does everybody, if we're supposed to invite other guests, would everybody know how to do that? you know?
Right.
So for me, I think it's gonna be for the commission to consult with. I'm not sure if we have other commissions or how many other commissions we have, but it's gonna have to be, you know, them liaising with, talking to the other groups, talking to everybody else, including them, so that they can say, okay, what do we actually need at this point? And not just this point, because I know we like to plan for in the now, but
Right.
what about the future? You know, what about 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Because I'm pretty sure if anybody told us that we could all be working from home, like not even a year ago, months ago, many of these companies would have said, impossible, you must come in for the meeting. And look at this, so when you're forced to make the change, you will make it. Because now, so many people, so many meetings that I would have had in person, now everybody, it's the norm now. Okay, yes, we're having a Zoom meeting. Look at this, we're having a panel on Zoom. You know what I mean? Before, that would not have been the norm. Persons, especially, you know, the older generation, they definitely would have been against it. They say, no man, you guys are this technology thing. But no, people don't have to go into bank. Many things that we were told could not happen has had to happen so fast. And so I think it's a matter of anticipating, like, what's next? Like, what's the next COVID? I mean, yes, I think COVID-19 was just something to prepare us, to let us know that, you know, you guys are too comfortable. Everybody's too comfortable in the space. You know, like, we need a shake-up, because it would have taken us, I don't know, maybe the next 5 years before anybody would be doing half of the things you've seen done in COVID. I feel like before, normally you ask for change, it would take months upon months, if not years. Now I'm seeing things, people talk about this, by tomorrow you see somebody commenting on it or implementing it. And you're like, wow, this could be done so quickly, which means that we can do it. But again, it's about vision and putting that urgency on it. I was actually speaking to a friend of mine last night, you know, because before I do these panels, I kind of want to get a feel of, you know, what are the, you know, other people saying, so that I kind of incorporate it into, you know, what I have to say. And the person, you know, was saying to me that it's not even going to be only the technology that we use, but like they were saying, we're going to have to ensure that maybe we do like testing to see where each student is right now. So for example, what I want to say, the online, some students, because I know some schools are thinking about doing like part online and then part face-to-face, right? All right, and they were saying that so somebody gave me a nice word, a gap analysis, yes. So right now, it's nice to say, okay, yes, some children need to go to online, some people need to go to school. How are you going to decide that? And I feel like we cannot just jump into this by making a general solution for everybody. I feel like there needs to be, and there are people who are trained in this, there needs to be something for them to actually assess, okay, there are some students who are further ahead, some who are further behind. Maybe those who are further ahead, you can have them do, you know, only online, and then those who are further behind, maybe you ensure that they have a mixture of the online and the blend, you know, that whole blended experience. I don't know what it is. I'm just saying it definitely cannot just be about the education as itself, like meaning just the word education, how they're learning. Like there's so many things. I also think, I know, just kind of pitching in a little bit off of the question now to kind of segue, because I hope we speak about mental health somewhere in this discussion. But even that, like, I feel like so many times we think the progress or the, you know, the success of our country is measured only by, you know, like, okay, are the figures saying that we have this amount of GDP or we hit this amount of economic growth? But then at the end of the day, the people are still unhappy. You know what I mean? And people are still like committing crime, because what it really was not just about the money, as I keep saying, like money doesn't solve everything, you know? And so I would hope that a big part of this educational, you know, commission's goal is to ensure that the mental health of our students, like, is something that has to be discussed. And I know so it's not only the teachers that are, you know what I want to say, like undervalued. I think the guidance counselors and the psychologists, like so many times when you say you're going to university, want to talk real, many persons, if you tell somebody you went and did a psychology degree, they said, and what else? And it's like, no, what if that's it? What if that's it? What if I wanted to dedicate my time to just psychology? Because there's so much you need to learn about the mind. There's so much you need to understand that many students who come to me, it's not even a math problem they have, you know. Sometimes I have to say to the parent, I actually think you should send them to counseling, because it's a problem of them not being able to understand what is happening with them because of what is happening at home, maybe what they're experiencing, you know, just transitioning from one age group to a next, you know, the whole issue of having friends, not having friends, all of that affects some students. And so we think it's just, oh, if we don't see them performing, Yeah, man, it's just lazy. Them lazy. Them
Lazy,
don't want to do
right?
no work, and that's not true. It is so much deeper, you know.
Right. Well,
And somebody said for teachers too.
yeah.
And that goes back to
Yeah.
what Lorenzo said about treating students as humans.
Right. So,
But
but
go
if
ahead,
I may
Lorenzo.
come in, yeah, here. So, yeah, in the launch, at the launch, the Prime Minister did talk about, you know, STEM education. So because I get the feeling from different speeches that he has made, and from him being Minister of Education way back in, I think, 2007, don't remember. But from then and to now, I think his focus, his push is really on STEM education. And so he did mention that. And another thing that he did mention as well was the fact that he stated that we need to have a shift from being users of technology to developers of technology. And I think that's very important. Like, and that point or statement kind of gives us an idea of where he wants the commission to go, of more skills, STEM-based science, technology, education, math, that sort of push in education. I think that's where he wants to go. And that tied in deep, closely with what Bunting said at the launch as well, where Bunting was making the statement, or making or highlighting rather the deficit in the education system. And he's saying that the education system must be developed in the context of the 21st century. So we must look at robotics, introducing more robotics in school, introducing more AI in school, and stuff like that. And then that also was nicely tied in with what the chairman, Professor Pattison, said at the launch, by looking at, he's focusing on a knowledge economy. That's what he wants. He was talking about building a knowledge economy. And the truth is that we can only build a knowledge economy if we focus on skills, and if we focus on, looking at those soft skills that we need to bring out in our students. So again, it goes back to looking at how we prepare our teachers for teaching in the 21st century, that we cannot use the same methodology, the same, method that we're using now, rather 10 years ago, to use now. And why do I say that? It is COVID has given us a good opportunity and a good platform to shift what we're doing. For example, in this whole pandemic thing, I was teaching online for 13 weeks. And in the 13 weeks of teaching online, it was most eye-opening. One, I'm teaching history, and I'm teaching history to boys. And at the end of the 13 weeks, the students said to me that this was the best class they've had. Why? Because I had to shift my methodology. I have to shift my instruction altogether and use technology, use problem-based learning to get these boys engaged. So looking at problem-based learning is a very, very good strategy, a very good method to use in teaching, because what it does is that it gets our children, our students to think. It gets them to identify a problem and to formulate, possible solutions to that problem. And also with the problem-based learning, what it does is that it helps students to work in groups, to look at group dynamic, to look at who is the leader, to look at who is the researcher, and all of those things. And what you're doing at the end of the day is that you're identifying your strengths and your weaknesses out of that one activity. And that's and that is what we need right now. And that cannot be facilitated by just going in and putting up a project and read off the project and having students taking notes. No, the teacher will now have to reinvent his or herself. They have to reinvent themselves. Teaching colleges will have to reinvent themselves, and to see how best we can use ICT to push education, in our schools. How best can we use ICT to work alongside, and it goes, now this also goes back. So if we're pushing ICT, then we must push internet, access. We must push that, because it goes hand in hand.
And again, just keeping it frank, sorry to cut you
Yeah.
guys. Right. Because I'm so happy that this is an open discussion, right? Meaning where we can be honest. I know many persons are talking about the fact that, okay, yes, the internet is bad, but it's almost as if it's like a pass by. When that is like one of the, it's such a big issue. There are times when I'm trying to make a call, cannot get through on the call. I'm on the internet. I've just been hoping here and praying. Okay, let's hope it stays reliable for this entire Zoom call. And I mean, that should not have to be. But then it's one thing for us to say, but then both telecommunication companies kind of just skip over it, meaning it's just business as usual. They know it's happening, but I feel like nobody is saying what is happening. What are you guys going to do about it? It's just okay, it's just happening. And I don't know, like for me personally with that internet thing, I think something has to happen. So for the past 3 weeks, I've been having free, sessions for math. And my vision for that initially was to do the live sessions on YouTube. Because again, I was saying, okay, yes, even though some persons are using Zoom, I didn't even want for the persons who aren't able to use Zoom or not to figure it out. I just wanted them to just tune in on the YouTube and they see me and I teach. I have everything. I got extra camera stand. I did everything to make sure that they had the best experience. I think it through. What's happening? The internet connection is not strong enough for me to actually do a live session on YouTube. Whereas I am looking at other teachers in Trinidad who are getting to do that. You know what I mean? And I'm saying, here I am, a teacher who is ready to give that extra, and I was not able to even help as many students as I wanted to, simply because the internet connection is not there. Because by the time the delay is so far behind, it was almost 20 seconds. So that's not live. When the student needs to ask the question, I'm already 20 seconds ahead. You know what I mean? That already takes away from the learning experience. So I just feel like with that internet, and especially because school is going to be opening up September into October, it has to be that something like that needs to be an uncomfortable conversation that is had. Because it's just not going to work if we don't talk about it.
Yeah, I think that needs to be addressed, and we agree. But I think what the ministry is doing to deal with that problem, the problem of connectivity, is to look at the using recorded sessions. I don't particularly like it, but it's a way to address it for now.
It's a start.
Yes, recorded sessions. For example, they are now retrofitting a studio at PBCJ, which will be dedicated solely to education content or educational content for the new school year. So that is one good thing for the ministry, and using the blended approach is another very good thing. As a matter of fact, blended approach has been going on for quite some time, particularly in Canada, in the US. They have been using blended approach where seniors, high school students, I'm talking about high school students, seniors, there'd be a week where they stay home and they learn online. But for the other 4 days, they go into the physical space and they'll learn face to face. But one thing I'd also want to say, to go back to just looking at my experience with the online process, was that the students, maybe it was the platform that I used, maybe it was the strategy that I was using, but the students were very much engaged. These were students who would not be necessarily engaged in a face-to-face session. These are students that would pretty much be sleeping or be talking in a face-to-face session. They were engaged in the online platform. So maybe it is though that this is now an opportunity to reach students who weren't being reached at all in the face-to-face classroom.
Yeah, definitely.
We should not waste this opportunity at all. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for education, that this can address some of the problems that we've been having with student engagement in the classroom. Because I found that particularly the boys, they were excited for class. They were excited for the sessions or the lessons. They were excited for the activities. Again, I don't know, maybe it's what I use and with others, but I find that they were just excited for being online and excited in learning in this sort of environment than the face-to-face environment. So there is that we have to contend with.
So I really love the volleying that went on a while ago between you two. You kind of just took it away, and based on what you guys said, it's just so much to unpack. as it relates to education, but we are close to closing. But I have one more question. And I'm going to put you on the spot now because you know you're talking to JCCYC in partnership with Environmental Solutions. So we have to bring it back to the environmental reality. So, so as you both have pointed out, COVID-19 does present an opportunity for us, especially around this issue of ICT access. With climate change impacts waiting around the corner, just right around the corner for us to reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius, do you think we are doing enough as it relates to moving our educational system or educational services online? But we just spoke about all of the issues with access and keeping students active and training and all of that. Do you think we're doing enough? What is it that we need to do to ensure access is sustainable? So not just move it online, but it's sustainable. Should we have another disaster? Remember, Gonzales is right around the corner. Thankfully, school is out. So what do we need to do to ensure access is sustainable? Should we have another disaster that will force us to do most of our business from home?
I think firstly, it goes back to the point that Michaela was mentioning, was making earlier, of these telecommunications services something has to be done to expand bandwidth. So expand connectivity across the island, so have greater connectivity pretty much across the country. One, two, we have to train teachers in using ICT. For the life of me, and I just don't know why, there are just too many of our teachers who are afraid of technology. Afraid of technology. And that mindset, we have to break that mindset and get more of our teachers trained in ICT. And Microsoft, so this is not a plug for Microsoft, but it's a nice platform. But Microsoft Education Center, they have tons of courses on Microsoft Education Center that deal with digital classroom and how to teach in a digital classroom. For example, engaging students in a digital classroom and stuff like those. And it's free. It's free. You do these courses, it's like maximum 2 to 4 hours that you spend, going through these courses. You learn a skill, you learn a new method, you pick up a new strategy here and there. The teacher, as I said before, the teacher in this time, in this 21st century, in this COVID period, must be flexible, must be adaptable. They have to change, they have to switch gear, moving away from the traditional into the modern. And so that's one avenue that they can go. There's several other webinars that they can, sign up to. So workshops and these Microsoft Center, as I said before, you go there and do a course and learn a skill and so forth. Number 2 and 3, we have to just embrace the change and embrace moving forward, because what we're going to do is tell 21st century we're not ready. No, we have to meet it. We have to meet it where it is and embrace it. And I'm being, so we have to pretty much do that. So one, look where the government, Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, I think it is, and the Ministry of Education would have to come together and sit these telecommunications people down and say, hey, we need to expand bandwidth across the country because we need to have greater connectivity, with ICT and so forth. And as I said before, the teachers have to change their mindset, have to change how we train teachers, have to change our approach in this business called education, where we have to train or we have to learn how to learn as teachers. We have to relearn things in essence there.
Yeah.
Michaela?
I like that point. We have to learn how to learn. That's a powerful statement, everybody. That's a bomb. That's a gem right there coming out of the BT. But no, I definitely agree with everything. I think one of the major things we have to do if we're going to be prepared for, any type of disaster or pandemic or anything that will come is to just continue to act with urgency. What I don't want is because the numbers are starting to go down or, will eventually start to go down. It's kind of like, okay, let's lay back and, we have time. No, let's act as if we don't have time.
True.
Let's continue look, as somebody said, in this time we realize that the impossible can be made possible. So rather than trying to think, okay, how can we try to go fully back into, fully the physical space? How about we continue to try to find a way to make the blended learning work? Yeah, just so that in the event something happens, and either way take it, there must be some benefit. I'm pretty sure there are studies which will show that there is benefits to blended learning. You understand? So it's a matter of the only way we're going to get better at it is by practicing. Unfortunately, Lawrence, I'm one of those teachers you spoke about that is very afraid of technology. But then guess what? Because I was forced to use it during this time, like now I actually love it. And I'm saying, whoa, it's actually not that scary. It's just, and there are things that I remember the first Zoom class I had, I was using the whiteboard, and, there were some things that I still wanted to do. And then maybe by the fifth time of doing it, whether because I had to go and research and look it up or just playing around with it, I realized there were so many things I could do, but that was only because I was practicing, right? So it's the same thing. I know in the Vision 2030, we talk about wanting people to just appreciate the importance of lifelong learning. So there's always going to be something new for you to learn. So even as a teacher, even in whatever profession, you are, like, I don't think as Jamaicans, we have that attitude of, learning never ever stops. In our case, it's like, okay, if you go to university, all right, just want done university, so that is it. Not realizing that even if you're a marketer, like, there are new marketing trends happening every day. So you need to be updating yourself, whether through articles. Yes, it doesn't always have to be the formal education system, but whether it is through articles, as you said, there are free online courses that you can do in an hour. It's just to know what is happening in the space. What are other countries doing? You know what I mean? So for me, I think if we're gonna be ready, I think one, we need to look at how other countries are handling this, whether good or bad, and take lessons from what is happening around us. I don't think we have to make all the mistakes for ourselves. We can start to look at how have others responded to it. What are the good ones? What are the bad ones? And see how best that fits into the context of Jamaica. I think we need to, as the parents, I think the parents need the extra support in this, just because I think they need to know as well what to do should something else happen. It's not just about how will the schools respond. It's like, okay, if this happens again, are the parents ready to support the children? Because then if they're going to be at home, because that's what COVID has shown us, that you take them out of the school setting. So yes, you go and you fix up the schools, you put in all the nice equipment, you do everything nice to the schools, but then, another pandemic happens and everybody has to stay home. Then what happens? All of that work goes on the drain. So you want to ensure, no matter where the student is, that entire learning environment is conducive to them, doing well. So you want to ensure that, again, the parents, the household, what can the parents do? Just as an aside, there is a student that I teach, and I realized that he really likes video games. And, I was saying to the parent, because, they were saying, they're going to take away the video games because all he's doing is, playing the video games. And I said to them, rather than trying to take that away, why not incorporate the learning into the video games? Because there are many math video games out there. And the last class I had with him, I actually found a video game that was very similar to the ones he plays, and it has math in there. And I'm just saying, even something like that, the student would be occupied, so while the parent can get the time to go and cook or whatever. Because no, it's a matter of that the students are home and the parents don't know how to entertain them. You know what I mean? So even something like that, you don't want the momentum to die down, that a lot of students in this time, they've just been home. So even the learning, yes, the focus has been on ensuring the CXC students, had the necessary preparation, but I'm sure the grade 7s to grade 9s got left behind. Because I have some students who told me that the teachers, they were focused on the CXC students. So they stopped having regular classes with the grade 7. So it means that for about 3 months, one of them, he told me about 2 months now, he hasn't had any math class. He don't remember anything. Imagine if he wasn't coming, to his parent didn't say, okay, you know what, I want him to get back in the group. When September comes, it's going to be having to realize, which is why I said I think we need a gap analysis, because you're going to have to say, okay, now that we've basically had this 3-month, 4-month break, where are the students? Because there's some students, especially if it was just about rote learning, they really didn't grasp the content in full. So when it is that you haven't engaged them for so long, and then now we have to go and re-engage them, everybody's not going to be at the same place. You know what I mean? So it's thinking about things like that. Thinking about, as you said, how to prepare for the next one. After just dropping the mental health, somebody mentioned that, there's going to be a lot of, maybe for some persons, she's sure there's going to be trauma coming out of this experience. I definitely agree. There's so many students who right now they don't even know what is happening. I was looking at one of the releases and it was saying that I think the sixth formers, because results for CXC are supposed to be posted end of September. So, you know, they'll place them in sixth form come October. But in my mind, like that's already 2 months out of school has gone. You know what I mean? Like, if I was a student right now, I would feel so anxious. Like, I just would feel so overwhelmed, so overburdened that I don't know. I give it up to the students who did CXC this year. To be honest, I think they all deserve once, but that's just the emotion in me, right? But just preparing, I think as well, we need to have ensure the mental health is a part of that strategic plan, so that, you know, okay, what kind of mental issues came out of this, so that we ensure that when it happens again, do we need to have more guidance counselors on call? Is it that we need to have more support, systems in place? That has to be a part of the discussion as well, to ensure that all the moving parts and we're prepared. But we have to keep that sense of urgency. We can't get complacent, or else something else is gonna come. And as you can see, I know you guys are, climate change. I've been watching Our Planet on Netflix, and it's basically just telling you about all the not so wonderful things happening with our world, and what could happen. And for me, I'm just saying, wow, like if and when, I guess you guys as the climate change people, can let us know. But with everything and the world changing so fast, I don't even think we can fully predict everything. So even though we think Corona is the worst of it, a year from now, it could be something else. It definitely. So I think I'm happy that you guys actually decided to ask that question, because then it's like, let's not pretend as if there's probably not going to be another one of this again, in the future, especially if when we're building these technologies and things, are we going to consider the effect on the environment? So is it just going to be, okay, yes, let's just produce more things? What about the factories that are producing these things? All of that has to be in the discussion as well, or is it just going to be a cycle? I see somebody is, it's Danny.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for all that you just shared. I mean, at the end of these sessions, we try to do like a little wrap up of 3 major points that have come out, so that people can walk away with the key talking points. But once again, there is just so much that has been revealed. It makes me realize that it's not for a lack of knowledge, really, that we are where we are in Jamaica. We have all the information, all the research has been done, all the knowledge is there. Not all, but we know what we need to know to make a lot of changes. And so now it's like you said, it's time to take urgent action. So first and foremost, I want to thank you both so much for being so open and honest and not being afraid to say things that others might not want to say. Sometimes it does have to be uncomfortable, as you said. If I use the Forbes article that I shared earlier, I've been the one blowing up the chat for everybody who wants to know. We have a lot to do to get ready for this 4th industrial revolution that's going to change the way we work and live and educate our people. So we need to do a gap analysis and a needs assessment from a technological perspective, a human resource perspective, materials perspective, in order to ensure that our students are up to date on a local and a global scale, for them to be ready once they get out of school. And I like what Lorenzo said, we need to learn how to learn. We need to keep learning. We're students forever. Lifelong learning is how we're going to progress. We need to improve on our STEM education, our problem-based learning. Yes, it's the focus of the government, but that's something that not only the students need to be up to speed with, but we need our teachers to know how to educate students in STEM. We need our parents to understand what STEM education is. And that takes me to the next point, which is that we have to engage all of the players in this activity. We can't just say, it's a trickle down from the top situation. We have to make space, safe space, for the teachers, for the students, for the parents, and for the community support. Yes, we have to address mental health themes and psychosomatic issues that might come out of this period. After hurricanes, after earthquakes, people show different behavioral things, and I'm quite certain that we're going to be seeing that moving forward. And so it's something that we need to address. Last 2 points, I see Maria looking at me. This whole using schools to perpetuate the class divide, we're all aware of it, but again, we need to address it. What are we gonna do? And I leave this out there for Flow and for Cable and Wireless, or Digicel, whatever the name. Telecoms has to ready up themselves. I can't be praying to the ancestors every time we have to do one of these COVID chats to make sure that we don't get cut off. I know that was a lot for everyone. I put the links in the chat for everyone to access for whenever they are ready. Remember, you can follow us on social media. I'll put all the handles back in the chat, and our guests can feel free to share their handles in there as well. For those of you who want to listen to our podcast, we have all the sessions recorded from our previous very insightful, very exciting COVID chats. And yeah, so just thank you once again for that. This is our wrap up. I'm happy it was such an insightful talk.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel.
Same here. Thank you for having
So
me.
our next COVID chat session will be on August 2. That's not this Sunday, the following Sunday, and we'll be looking at the human dimensions of a pandemic, and we'll be looking at how COVID affects demographics. So, Michaela, at that point, we'll be delving into the whole mental health issues that would arise. So I hope you are available and able to tune in and share your thoughts on that one as well. So thank you again for coming, guys. Thank you for all the guests for sticking it out with us. I know it's lunchtime, so I trust and hope that we all have a great weekend. Thanks again for joining us.